Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, Azell Ford, Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, and Freddie Gray. All 6 of these men were killed by police officers, and all 6 of them were unarmed. Now, people might chalk this up to a few bad apples in an otherwise upstanding tree, that this isn't an institutional problem at all. But the fact that none of these officers were convicted and only few were charged shows that this might be an institutional problem after all. Being a police officer is a difficult and dangerous job. There's no doubt about that. But that's all the more reason that we need to hold officers accountable for their actions. And the best way to do this is through the implementation of body cameras. Today, I'll speak about the problem of police accountability in our country, how we can combat this problem through the use of body cameras, and how this will ensure a safer and more cost-effective environment for our future society. So I'll start off with the fact that we have a serious accountability problem in this country when it comes to police officers. Combating police brutality must be a priority in this country, because police officers have committed heinous crimes, including murder and manslaughter in the past, and simply haven't paid the price. We see alarming and saddening stories in tabloids and online, but what we don't see in those stories is that this is only a fraction of the number of times this happens nationwide, and that's a number that's growing every single year. According to 538, a leading research website in national statistical analysis, out of thousands of fatal police shootings since 2005, only 77 police officers have been charged with murder or manslaughter, and only 26 of those 77 have been convicted. That's an astonishingly low and an astonishingly suspicious number. Moreover, in 2015, 97% of cases in which police officers used deadly force did not result in a charge for the officer. And this has a racial component as well. In 69% of cases in which African Americans were killed by police officers, they neither committed a violent crime nor had possession of a weapon. That means that in more than 2 out of 3 of these instances, officers felt that they needed to use deadly force despite the fact that there may not have been an imminent threat to their life. And this is because there's no transparency in these cases. If you look at a case like Michael Brown's, there was no definitive video of what happened, and the hearing became a he said, she said ordeal. And as is the nature in most of these cases, Michael Brown was not around to testify. Now in courts, this is also a problem. And first, because investigators are often conducting these investigations internally, which can lead to a conflict of interest. Now this might be fine in a workplace environment, where one colleague evaluates another coworker, or whether a boss evaluates an employee. But this cannot be the case in a situation that has such legal implications and when lives are on the line every single day. According to the Department of Justice, investigators in a Cleveland case admitted to, quote, intentionally casting officers in the best light possible when investigating the use of deadly force. That means these investigators are going into such cases with a preconceived bias, recognizing that that bias exists and acting on it anyway. And this is true with prosecutors and jurors as well. Prosecutors have police officers in and out of their office on a daily basis. These police officers help them build evidence, help strengthen their case, and make their job easier. And prosecutors will say that it's infinitely harder to try these police officers days later. And the same is true for jurors. Jurors are ordinary people, like all of us. They're brought up believing that police exist to protect us, that they wear that badge to keep us safe. And 99% of the time, that is true. But we must be able to distinguish that 99%, that outstanding police officer, that police officer that exists to keep us safe, from that 1%, that police officer that didn't follow protocol, and that caused somebody to die because of it. So now that I've established why police accountability is a problem in this country, I'll explain how we can solve it. And how we can solve it isn't rocket science. This is what a body camera looks like on a police officer. You can see it's rather small and strapped to their chest. And by no means is it a physical impediment to their ability to do their job. Now in Rialto, California, which is a town that I'll speak about in a little bit, officers have taken this a step further, strapping body cameras to their sunglasses. And this allows people in situations that might need to watch these videos because of a violent crime to be able to see it from the exact same vantage point that the officer can. And that's crucial in these cases. So this is how the law should read. And this should be mandated at the state level. Whenever an officer is responding to a call, exiting their vehicle, or conducting an investigation, that officer should immediately turn their body camera on. And that body camera should not be turned off until the conclusion of the investigation. And more importantly, the officer must inform the subject that they are being recorded at the outset of this encounter. Because according to the American Civil Liberties Union, this part and this part alone of the policy is what ensures its constitutional legality. Now this might seem harsh towards officers, but it gives them the incentive to act accordingly. Because if they don't, they'll face punishments. If they don't fulfill the aforementioned parts of the policy, then they're subject to suspension, and in certain cases, possibly termination and charges. But if officers follow protocol, which they've been taught to do, and every police academy works on these procedures, then they should have nothing to worry about. And if they don't, then that's the kind of accountability that I'm asking for. It'll also get rid of these preconceived notions in juries. And if this part seems like common sense, bear with me, because it is. If I describe to you what a picture might look like, you can only get such a good image of what that actually looks like. But if I hold up that picture and I show it to you, you could be able to pick it out of a crowd the next day. The same is true in these court cases. The prosecution and the defense act as a middleman, trying to relay this information to a jury. But what if the jury could just see this information on their own? What if they could watch the same video that happened on that day? If they could watch that video, they'd have a clearer idea of what actually happened in the case. So now that I've talked about the policy that we should institute, I'll explain how this makes it safer and actually more cost efficient. First, it's been proven to reduce police brutality and crime. According to the New York Times, when the police force in Rialto, California first adopted this policy, complaints against officers dropped by 88%. And the use of force dropped by 60%. And that's in just 1 year. This shows that these body cameras are acting as a deterrent against criminals and police officers, because both parties recognize that if they use force in situations where they shouldn't, that they can face the consequences, and there's no getting around what happens on a video evidence. But the main qualm in this law is that these body cameras would cost a fortune, and there's really no getting around the fact that this initial cost would be high. However, this initial cost would be far surpassed in money that we would save on future trials and future appeals. Every time there's a police brutality case that goes to court, that's money that's paid by the state, and that money's being taken out of people's pockets through taxes. If there are fewer cases of police brutality, then there will be fewer trials, and if there are fewer trials with this conclusive video evidence that I just spoke of, then there will be fewer appeals because there are less grounds to have these appeals. Now, according to the government's technology big database, the average body camera costs about $1,000. Now that might seem like a lot, but that's because right now there's no market for body cameras. If there was a market for body cameras and police officers around the country needed them, competition would cause this price to drop. But for now, since it's at $1,000, let's assume for this model that that's what the price would be. According to the Baltimore Sun, Maryland's leading newspaper, it would cost $11.6 million to put a body camera on every single police officer in Baltimore. Now that also seems like a lot, but the state of Maryland spent $7.6 million this year on the trial of Freddie Gray. Now if there were to just be one more case of even similar to that severity, that would exceed the $11.6 million that I'm proposing should be spent to combat this problem before it occurs. Why try to fix the problem for more money after the fact when we could solve the problem and spend less money doing it? Body cameras are proven to reduce police brutality and to cause less money in these cases. So today I've spoken about the problems with police accountability, how we can combat these problems through the implementation of body cameras on police officers, and how this would cause a safer and more cost-efficient environment in our future society. So I urge each and every one of you, speak to your local legislators because those are the people that are in contact with your police force. It's not going to be the government way up top with the president and Congress. It's going to be the people in your local districts that are in contact with these police officers. And if that doesn't work, talk to your local police officers. Pick their brains, because I'm sure a lot more of them are on board with this plan than you might think. So yeah, the saying goes, a few bad apples could spoil a bunch. And that's too much to have continuing in this country. Thank you.